Thanks everyone for joining us, FMC, for our first webinar of 2020. We are planning a good handful of webinars throughout the year this year, so make sure that you keep an eye out on our newsletter for upcoming trainings and events. My name is Stephanie Fenty. I'm the Operations and Communications Coordinator at the Farmers Market Coalition. And with me here is Heidi Anderson of the Farm Board, who will be hosting the presentation. Before we get started, I just want to take care of a few quick housekeeping items. We expect this entire webinar to last about an hour and 15 minutes. And we're going to keep everyone muted for the first portion of the webinar, which will be a brief overview of values-based marketing and why it could be a useful strategy for farmers markets. If you have any questions or comments during the presentation part, you can use the chat function and send it over, and then we will read your question and answer it. Then we'll switch over to the workshop portion, and we'll unmute everyone for that, for open discussion. Everyone who registered should have received an email with a sign-in form, so please fill that out if you haven't yet, as well as a spreadsheet that we'll be using during the workshop. If you didn't receive that email, please let me know in the chat box, and I'll send it over to you during the presentation portion. We're also recording the meeting, so it'll be available in the membership portal, and then over the next few days, so you'll be able to rewatch if you have to jump off early, or if you know someone who could make it. The recorded webinar will be available later. So without further ado, here is Heidi Anderson.
Hi everyone, super happy you could make it. I thought I would start with a quick, version of my story, which is that I went to UC Berkeley and studied anthropology, and during that time I worked on an organic, sustainable educational farm that really, caused me to love the whole local farming industry and want to support it. And right around that time, I also taught school in a food desert area where I witnessed hunger in the US. And I traveled abroad where I witnessed hunger abroad. So I have a passion about food and healthy food access. And right around that same time, I was exposed to both some heavy metals and organophosphate pesticides that actually created decades of sickness for me. So I'm super passionate about restoring our food system. And I think that farmers markets are at the core of that, because I think it's all about local, regeneratively grown, healthy foods. So for the past 30 years, I have been in software development leadership. And in 2014, some colleagues and I started developing an app that helps local economies thrive, which is why I'm at the FMC and why I'm here. Our whole focus is on making it really easy and profitable for farmers to share their availability, either through the farmers market or on their own. So jumping into values-based marketing, it's a mindset that actually is different than probably most of you have been thinking about things. It's a visitor-centric mindset. So it assumes that there's a primary target visitor for the market, and that visitor has a primary purpose for coming to the market, and then that stereotypical visitor has values that they want to have met by the market. And the assumption behind values-based marketing is that if things are optimized for the visitor segments, then that optimizes the market success, and it optimizes the vendor success as well, because the primary visitors are the ones who are going to buy the most from the vendors. So in addition, so that's the fundamental mindset. And then there's a process that we came up with that makes it really easy for markets to apply that mindset. And it has, today we're going to talk about 4 of the 5 steps. It has 3 strategic steps. So one is to segment your market by visitor purpose. So, and then identify a primary segment is the second step. And then identify that segment's values and prioritize those. And this is all, we're going to repeat walking through this. So I'm giving you an overview that's quite meaty, and then we'll get into the workshop, and you'll be able to do it on your own market and kind of do a repeat through the thinking. So don't worry too much about all this material. Then from a tactical perspective, you'll develop a plan to align everything about your market to your primary segment's purpose, desires, and values. And today what we're doing is just the communication piece of that. But in this overview, I'll just mention the other pieces that can be aligned that make everything easier for you. So the first step is to segment your market. So this is categorizing your potential visitors, which we're calling an audience. The audience are those people who, you know, would make good visitors to the market. And they're being categorized based on their primary purpose for the visit. So there's some examples here. Food sourcing is one example, eating, being entertained, connecting with community. You may be able to think of some more, and we'll collect those later. So as I'm talking, start thinking about your market. And then the second piece is to identify which one of those is the most important one that you're serving. So then we can focus on that to craft some communication around. The second step is to identify the values of each segment. So I took food sourcing as an example here. And I'll give a quick story of something that happened to me last summer that we can use throughout this presentation. I was driving my sister to the airport last summer, and I got a text from my husband asking for kale and parsley for his green drinks. And I went through this somewhat rapid but back and forth argument with myself about whether I should stop at the farmer's market, which was actually on my way. But I didn't know if they had parsley. And so I did, and there were some other problems too. So I did decide to force myself to stop at the farmer's market. And I tried to park, and I had a pretty extreme difficulties parking. And I went in, and there was a lot of festival goers there. So it was very crowded. And I went to my favorite vendor, and I knew they would have kale, which they did. They didn't have parsley. But I had to wait for 15 minutes in line because it was overcrowded. So I got the kale, and by the time I got the kale, I was kind of overwhelmed. And the only place that might have parsley was about 1/8 of a mile away. It's a long market that has food vendors mixed with other kinds of vendors, and there's vegetable vendors on either end of it. And I actually just decided to bail. Like I couldn't, make myself go down there. So that is an example of if that market had a primary segment of food sourcer. So if I was one of their, primary target audience members, you can imagine there's lots of things there that could have been done to make it more attractive to me so that I go there more and buy more there. So I'm using food sourcing in the examples here because I have a passion about it. You could have anything, you could just as equally, I know there's a market in San Luis Obispo, a night market that's an entertainment market. You can do this work on any primary segment that you're targeting. And in this case, we categorized the values for a food sourcer into price, quality, convenience, and local buying, and then started subcategorizing them. So like you can notice that health is under quality. Health also could be under buying local. There's cross between values, and there's cross if we were to work through an eating hierarchy like this, health and quality would also be probably on the eating values. And then of course these, depending upon where your market is located in the country and what the local cultures are, the priorities of various values, the values themselves would change, and as well as the priorities of them. So then the third step is to align your segment purpose and values with your market across the board. So it's sort of a planned alignment. And, the first, in terms of marketing mix, the first area of alignment would be with product. So if you were to assume a food source or target segment, and that's looking for organic, regeneratively grown food direct from the farmer, things that you could plan to align might be accentuating that on social media, making trustworthy signage to identify vendors who have regenerative practices, et cetera, and assure that the vendors who offer all of that are clustered together so it's easy for visitors to buy. And even things like keeping conventionally grown foods away from the organic, all of those kinds of things. And then pricing, again, if the focus is on the visitor, the pricing has to be reasonably competitive with alternative sources. So if we're talking about a food sourcer, the pricing has to be reasonably competitive with like product at the grocery store, or else it doesn't matter what all the other values are. Most people aren't wealthy enough to do their food sourcing if the price is a lot higher. So this deviates from, I think, how a lot of people think today. There's a value for paying farmers, the price that the farmer selects out of respect for the farmer, which is important and great. And at the same time, it does a farmer a disservice if they're not pulling as much sales because their price is slightly too high. So that's values-based pricing. And then place are things like market layout and the parking, and there could be creativity around place, like providing parking vouchers for people who buy more than $50 worth of food as a food sourcer, things like that. And then promotion has the goal of making sure that the target audience segment knows about the market and that the entire target audience, and that they know the market exists for them and that their values are being met at the market. So the goal is that that the target segment knows the market serves them better than any alternative. And then from an operation perspective, vendor selection becomes actually easier with this kind of mindset. Vendors that align with the visitor segment's values are included. And then if a vendor can be neutral, where they're not aligned with the values, but they're not detracting. And then some vendors are offering things that are not in alignment with your primary segment. So those would be the vendors to exclude, and it's pretty easy to explain the reasons why, because the visitor segment values are actually aligned with the market itself. So back to the kale and parsley example, the things that would have made my decision to go to the market or not go much easier, even though I went, would be to have, it would have been super nice to have been able to look online and see if there was parsley at the market and at what booth. I'm a food sourcer, so I know where the booths are. I would have gone to get the parsley if it was there. And then price, in addition to knowing what product is available, it's super nice to know the price ahead of time. Place, somehow a better parking situation would have eliminated all my decision making. And co-location of the food sourcing vendors, and then avoiding flow of eaters and entertainment seekers in the food sourcing area, so it's not so stressful for the food sourcer. All of those things would have helped, and those things would have been values-based marketing kinds of strategies. So the main reason why to do this is it creates more success for the vendors and the market, and makes the market feel more and more aligned values-wise itself. It's focusing on a primary segment. So in the absence of a primary segment, the purposes and values of various segments can clash. So like, for example, an entertainment seeker wants a lot of activity and visual stimulation, and to be able to walk around somewhere that's beautiful and where there's lots of people, whereas a food sourcer probably values having the least amount of people possible, and not so much stimulation, but ease of getting what they want. So that's an example of a clashing value. And then when any business serves everyone, there's that old axiom that says serving everyone results in serving no one well. And it's just because everybody gets slightly compromised. So the idea behind values-based marketing is to serve the primary segment super, super well, and then design secondary segment experiences around that. So they're actually really happy too, but the avoidance of impeding experiences. It attracts more of the primary audience segments to the market, and it increases vendor sales. The differentiation from alternatives is increased. So it's really easy to differentiate from food sourcing alternatives with values, because nobody can outdo the farmer's market on values. And management and decision making is easier as well. Product and vendor choices are chosen because they're fully aligned, as I mentioned earlier. Pricing is chosen to attract the target audience to do their sourcing there, if it's food sourcing, or to attract the entertainment audience if it's entertainment, etc. And market layout is all about serving and not impeding the segments. Communication is designed to attract the particular segment, and it does. And then with metrics become really obvious, what metrics would be very helpful. So as an example, for a food sourcing purpose, an example metric to collect might be the dollar amount of food purchased per food sourcing visitor. And the goal might be to have that increase over time. Another metric might be what % of your visitors are food sourcers. And if your primary segment is a food sourcer and you're only at 10% of visitors are food sourcers, then a goal could be to increase the number of food sourcers at the market. And then examples of different values might be, competitive pricing was one I mentioned. So a metric that could be kept would be maybe farmers market pricing compared to whatever the local, health food alternative is. And the communication of pricing to combat any beliefs that the market is too expensive, which is really common. Okay, well, so that is the conceptual overview, and we thought we would pause for questions here. If anybody has any or comments or thoughts, and then we'll move into the workshop.
I'll go ahead and unmute everyone. So if anyone has questions, you can go ahead and just shout them out.
Do you suggest assigned spaces for the vendors?
I don't have a stance on that at all. My perspective just comes from a framework for thinking for you to consider, and then you would decide those kinds of tactical details based upon your particular market situation.
Okay. I just wondered if people like you to be in the same spot every time, and you know, if you're going to have all the food in one place, then it kind of makes sense to assign people.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep.
Thank you.
Great. Yes, thank you.
I have a question about pricing, and how would you even begin that conversation with your farmers about adjusting their prices? Because as you said, when we feel strongly that they need to be allowed to earn their worth, but this isn't something that we've considered before in terms of asking them to consider competitive prices.
Yeah. I actually would offer to help you to craft that message, and I can tell you if you're interested, I would just do that for you. But the sort of general idea would be to describe this kind of marketing to the vendors, in a few short sentences. It would be, if you're food sourcing, if your primary segment is food sourcing, you would, basically explain to the vendors that that the market is attracting food sourcers who have this set of values, and they have pricing thresholds, and that we want to attract them to increase vendor sales. It's good for the vendors, but they have a pricing threshold, and so you're asking your vendors to, consider that with their pricing. And you're essentially helping them run their business better by doing it. So if you want more than that, contact me afterwards and I can help you.
Thank you.
I'm curious about how you would suggest advertising online. Like you had suggested, if you had been able to look on a website for price points and availability, do you have methods that would work really, or ideas that would work really well for that kind of thing?
I actually, that is the product that I've been working on creating. So we have that. And I don't know of an alternative way that doesn't have quite a bit of overhead, but if you had an intern or something that could maintain it on a regular website, that would be another option instead of what we have. And I would be happy to show you what we have. It's intended to, our passion, the reason why we're doing this work is that we want to help local economies thrive and grow for a better planet, really. So we have a values-based organization, and that's where we're focused.
Awesome, thank you.
Hi, this is
How
Rose
far do they go back?
from Massachusetts. I sort of had to leave the meeting for a few minutes and came right back. I'm not sure if this question has been asked, but going back to sort of defining the values of your segment audience, what's a good way to figure out what those values are? Because I feel like from vendor side of things and also from the farmers market side, we may assess those values to be different than
My thought is I haven't met many
of shoppers.
Yeah, so the idea, and we'll do this in the workshops, so you'll get to walk through it. We'll do it together on one instance, and then you'll get to do your own. So it'll become really easy, I think. But you're focusing entirely on your visitor segment and not on the vendors, because the assumption is that if you serve the visitor segment, then you are serving the vendors because it's drawing them into aligned vendors. So what we're going to do today is take a guess at what the primary vendor segments for your market value, and then I'm assuming that most of you will want to collect more information from your visitors about what their values are. So it would
Bo
be,
here says they do surveys at their market to find out why visitors are shopping. So that's kind of what we would hope that you would move towards is starting to collect more of that information from the visitors themselves to see what their primary interests are.
Yeah, and going off of that real quick, if any of you would like, we actually just completed a comprehensive intercept survey back in October. I saw a question about what kind of questions you use, and I'd be happy to share that with the group if that would be helpful to anyone.
That would be awesome. Thank you.
That's wonderful. Thanks. Okay.
Donna, I think Donna might have had a question, but she might have, maybe it was answered. Nope. Okay, go ahead.
Well, let's move into the workshop for now, because everyone will be able to talk a little bit more during that section. And then we could get to some of the other questions in the chat as well.
Great. Okay. Yeah, so is there anybody that doesn't have a copy of the workshop workbook?
I don't.
Okay. Lisa.
Was it emailed? I'm looking now.
It was.
Yeah.
Who is that that said that they don't?
It was Lisa.
Lisa Herrick?
Lisa. Okay, I will send it to you right now.
Okay.
Is there anybody else that's missing it? Okay. And the other good thing to have on hand is some either real or virtual stickies, or you can tear up a piece of paper. But what we're going to be doing is prioritizing values as part of this, so that will help. Okay, so the steps that we're going to do mirror what I just rapidly talked about. The first step is to segment your market, and then we're going to identify and prioritize primary segment values. And to get to Rose's question, that one will answer that. And then we will create a communication content plan as the third step. Let's start with the first step and then let's get into. Okay, so if you look at the first tab of your spreadsheet, the tabs are along the bottom, and you just click on the tab titled Step 1. This tab looks roughly like what I have here. And what you want to do is just brainstorm up the primary purpose for which visitors come to your market. So the way you differentiate a purpose from a value is that the purpose, they're not going to go to your market unless they have this purpose. It's super fundamental, which is why we have food source or eater and entertainment seeker. And yeah, so see if you have anything that's not on this list or different. We'll just give a couple minutes to do that. And then for each one, we have some questions here about frequency of visits, the estimated percent of total visitors, and the range of dollars spent. And we're actually not going to do anything with those answers in this meeting, but they're good to start thinking about, because you can, they kind of trigger whether or not you might have, you know, there might be a misalignment with whatever your primary target audience is and what is actually happening at the market. And then they can, the answers to those questions can help you make decisions about what you want to tweak at the market. So why don't we just 2 minutes, and at the end of the 2 minutes, we'll just collect what you all came up with for your primary purpose and do some discussion. Okay, I don't know if 2 minutes has passed, but let's go ahead and go kind of around the virtual circle. And if people can just, maybe I'll call out some names that I noticed before, and you can just say what purposes you came up with, and I'll make some cards out of them. So Lisa, do you want to start? Or Kara May, maybe?
I had community connector.
Any others?
Oh, ours was mostly produce.
Okay. So it's a produce food sourcer.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Okay. Okay. Are there any others?
This is Lottie. Social space, eat, source food, like place to visit or a destination.
Okay. Anybody else?
I guess a lot of ours really, the intention is to keep it local. So is that included in that somewhere?
That would be a value.
Okay. I'm sorry.
Nope, that's okay. It's really hard to, it's actually hard to do this at first, and then it becomes very easy. So,
Okay.
I think a good way to think about it is the purpose is why are they coming? What's motivating them to come? And the value is what do they care about? What is someone who comes for that reason tend to care about?
Okay.
That might be helpful. Does that sound right to you, Heidi?
it's perfect. Yep. Thanks, Stephanie. Okay.
Sure.
So we can just pick one of these, and I'll show you how the values piece works. So does anybody have a preference for working through one of these for values? If not, I'll do the food sourcer because I'm so comfortable with it. So what we're talking about is food sourcer values. So you, to do this, you can pretend you are a food sourcer going to your own market, and what do you care about is probably the easiest way, since you probably all do. And you can just start telling me what example values are for what your food sourcer visitors care about, and then we can prioritize them when we're done. So it doesn't matter how important the value is. Let's just try and get about 10 of them as an example.
For me, I want it organic, and I want to buy from my friends.
Awesome.
So freshness, proximity to market.
Buy directly from the growers.
Yeah, and going along with that, I'm also supporting the local economy.
Environmental sustainability.
Better nutrition.
We have 9. Can anybody come up with one more? We don't have to have it.
Variety, maybe.
Yeah.
You know, also eating what's in season.
Yeah.
Yeah, packaging.
Yeah.
Or lack of packaging, I say.
Yeah. Okay. Awesome list. So are any of these, so I have this concept of threshold desires and differentiation desires. And so threshold, actually pricing is an example of threshold desires. There's some kind of a price for each product where it'll turn the product into a treat buy instead of a sourcing buy for most people. So we put pricing there. And it's done kind of unconsciously. So you can have people that are very committed to to sourcing at the farmer's market, but they can't justify going over a certain price unless they're rich. So that's an example of a threshold value where you have to make sure, like if you're doing, if you're serving the food sourcing segment, you have to make sure that you're under that threshold if you don't want to be doing treat buys. So can you think of any other threshold values that people are bringing to the market that maybe it's possible they're kind of concealed?
Can you explain that again, what threshold desire values are?
Yeah, it's that you have to meet, like in the case of pricing, the pricing of a particular product has to be under some amount in order for people to buy it as a food sourcing buy, as opposed to just buying it as a treat occasionally. And so if you are targeting food sourcers, you want to make sure that the pricing is set under whatever that threshold is.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Proximity to the market would be threshold.
Yeah.
Also, how local is local?
Mm-hmm.
Growing practices. So if it's not organic, what practices are they using?
Mm-hmm.
Like background.
Any others? And then the way I think about it is that all the other values are actually differentiation values. So the more of them that the market can meet, the better, the more loyal and attracted to the market the target visitor segment is. So buying direct from growers, if you have a market that's purely direct buy from growers, then that's more attractive than if it's a mix, to people who value that. Same with freshness. If there's super fresh product there, then it outcompetes all the local alternatives and will bind your target visitor segment to the market. So that's an example, and the next step for us workshop wise is to actually use let's see, go back to
Yeah, I mean, there's a couple people that
so you should have filled out the step 1 segment chart. And on step 2, you can either use these 2 charts to list threshold values and differentiation values for your primary segment, or you can use torn up pieces of paper or stickies to do it so that you can roughly prioritize them. You want to roughly prioritize them because that prioritization is going to feed into the communication plan. What we'll want to do is take the highest priority values that you want to promote and create the communication plan off of that. So I'll give you a couple minutes just to try and come up with your own 10 here, so that we can do a communication plan that has 10 items on it.
So Kirsten asked if we could define differentiation values again.
Yes, they are things where if the market meets it, it just makes the target visitor segment members more and more loyal and happy with the market. So those are all things where if you, you know, meet, or if you're exceeding a threshold value, it can move into a differentiation value.
I kind of think of it as thresholds can make or break whether someone comes, whereas a differentiation value is more of something that sweetens the deal or makes it better, right? So and it makes your market stand out from the other options.
Yes, that's a perfect way to put it.
And if you guys have any other questions or thoughts as you're doing this part, you can feel free to just shout them out and kind of brainstorm with the rest of the group.
We have a few things we do at ours, and I don't know if that fits into this category.
What's an example?
Okay, like one lady, she sews items, and everything that she, from her sales, she donates to like a charity. We also provide a scholarship with our fees. We have dog adoptions. You know, like would supporting bees by the honey maker be, or the honey person be an item?
Yep.
That supports the bees. One of our farmers, she was a corporate person and now she's able to stay home and farm, and they provide lettuce all year long. So like that's, to me, that's another thing. Like this isn't just the farmer's market, it extends all year with her particular. Do you see what I'm saying? Like you can get lettuce from her all year long, not just 4 times a month.
Yeah.
Or 4 times.
These are all really good examples of stories that you can tell in your communication plan that support particular values. So like if there's a value of environmentalism and then you tell your pollinator support story, you know, as part of that, then it supports that environmentalism value, or even the value of people loving pollinators and wanting to protect the pollinators specifically.
Okay. And also like that, the bee, like the honey promotes immunity, you know, so things like
health.
that.
Yep. Health.
Okay.
Health, right. Yeah. The value of health, or like availability, right? So like you said about the lettuce being available all year round, and it's locally grown lettuce availability all year round. It's kind of, that's a differentiation value, right? Because you can't get local lettuce everywhere you go, right?
Right.
Hi, this is Kara May in Napa, California, and I see those as differentiation values. Like if we're looking at the food sourcer and their main goal is to get their food for the week for fruits and vegetables, but we promote the differentiation values of supporting our local communities. So we have dog adoptions. We also have volunteers that pick up produce donated from the farmers and take it to the local food bank every market day. So those are ways that, you know, Whole Foods don't do that. So, you know, it's not like that's going to make or break someone's trip to the market, but it's going to say that this is a value that our farmers market supports our community beyond just being the best access for direct from the source fruits and veg.
Yeah, and that makes your visitors love your market more. They feel even better about spending their money there and supporting it because of those things. Yep. Okay, does anybody need any more time on this one? Let me see where we are. Just to get you, before we, so we're going to use these values to develop the communication plan. But before that, we thought we'd look at a couple of Instagram posts which are actually, they were part of the guest Instagram program for the FMC. So the target audience for these is actually FMC membership as opposed to market membership, but we thought they were really good to look at as a way to kind of tease out, okay, what can you figure out the purpose of this market and or their values from the post. And it doesn't matter, it doesn't matter, you know, a couple of them you can't tease out a purpose, I don't think. Which doesn't matter because that wasn't the intent of this, but we're just trying to get you into the thinking of communicating about purpose and values. So the first one I'm showing is the Clintonville Farmers Market, and if you want to read through that and then just say what you see is anything that's purpose or values indicating. I'll ask some leading questions. So this sentence that says, we hope our posts inspire to become a regular shopper at our local farmers market. And above, they're talking about that they're a producer-only market featuring foods grown in Ohio.
So you're asking who's the target audience and what the values that they're.
Yep. Yep.
Oh.
Yeah, and of course there could be multiple, right?
Yeah.
So, and of course the photo itself seems to be promoting a purpose and values as well. There's no right or wrong answer, guys.
Well, I think it's the food sourcer. So folks that maybe already shop organically or at like Trader Joe's or Whole Foods, and featuring, you know, that it's 29 miles away is an environmentally friendly practice of reducing carbon footprint. So the value would be environmental sustainability.
Mm-hmm. Awesome. And yep, and local sourcing. And then the producer only also gets to wanting to share, wanting to pay our farmers. Okay. Anybody else have any thoughts on that one? Okay, let's do another one.
You might want to zoom out or scroll down a little so they can read the whole post. Or do you want to just read it, Heidi?
Yeah, I can. Okay, so this one is it actually is long. It's now let's talk food justice. We believe that fresh and healthy food should be available to all. We're committed to leveling the playing field and reducing barriers to food security and community involvement. One way we do this is through Market Match. Market Match increases the purchasing power of low-income shoppers by doubling SNAP, WIC, and senior benefits. Each year, we aim to put $15,000 worth of fresh food on the tables of families in need. And then it goes on to say it's been impactful, but I actually think that's enough for, you know, thinking about what would you assume the purpose and the values are in this message.
So I was in the Warren Farmers Market, and they actually bused people from several locations to use their WIC and their SNAP. So they even provided busing.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah, so
Brian said strengthening community in the chat box as a value.
yeah,
That's definitely true.
Yeah, food accessibility
yeah,
Food access,
for all.
equity.
mhm. Okay, those are good. Any other thoughts? Let's do one more, see if it gets faster, and then these will be
Well,
easier for you to, or go ahead.
Oh, I'm sorry. It's nutrition for a lot of people that
Oh yeah,
couldn't
Health.
get to it and couldn't afford it. So
Yeah.
it's huge.
Nutrition, health,
Affordability is, I think that's a good point. Just because if your audience is the low income shoppers, right, and that's maybe their purpose is to make sure that the food that they're purchasing is affordable. This is definitely reaching that audience.
yeah.
It was on the
Okay.
courthouse square, so it was like actually it was kind of a nice mix because it was people that really it's a dry environment there. There's no, what do they call that? Food desert. So, but then it was also on the courthouse square where people came down and shopped on their lunch break. So it was nice.
Yeah, that's great. Okay, so then we'll do one more. It gets quicker. So this one says, it may be Black Friday, but after all that Thanksgiving feasting, we've got veggies on the mind, specifically cold-kissed, colorful, and locally grown winter veggies. The Mid-Atlantic region has a relatively long growing season, and this combined with seasonal farming means that we have a lot to offer in the winter, and we've got pictures to prove it. Enjoy. So what would you think the target purpose would be if you wrote this one?
Convincing your customers to be kind of a year-round shopper.
Yeah, I would say it's trying to encourage people to eat what's in season as opposed to, stuff that's grown thousands of miles away and whatnot.
Mhm.
Yeah. Yeah, those are great. Anything else? Yeah, so the values. What would the values of this one be?
Perhaps healthy eating.
Yep. Yeah, what else?
Yeah, I was thinking get back on track. It seems like after overindulging, get back to the basics.
Yep. And variety, right?
Mm-hmm. And probably preservation as well. Wouldn't that be harvest and canning season?
Yep.
I also like
Okay.
the language that they've used to describe the produce, because one thing that we've been told by nutritionists in particular is to stay away from describing produce and healthy foods as, healthy, because you use the word healthy and people get a certain thing in their minds. So I like the hashtag cold kissed. That was clever.
Me too. I thought that was amazing too. Okay. Okay. So now what we're going to do is talk about your final tab, which is the communication plan, and do a example or two on this. So this tab is meant to help you just think through about 10 pieces of communication really quickly based on your purpose and values list of your primary segment. So we have an example here. And sorry, we used Food Sourcer again. After I do this one, maybe Stephanie or others could come up with other examples. But for this one, the purpose is Food Sourcer, and then the value that I wrote this on was variety. And so relevant data points for this might be that you have X varieties of vegetables expected this season at the market. There's Z varieties more than last year, and Y varieties at Saturday's market. Could be one set of data points or any portion of those. And then you can come up with a story. You know, we were talking about the we started talking about stories a little bit earlier, but this example is Farmer Joe is offering 8 varieties of eggplant this Saturday, or the story could be Mary says her kids love the rainbow produce that we go home with each week. You know, it gives the story reiterates the variety value. And then the message content, you know, can be some mix of those. This says largest variety of regeneratively grown food, all sourced within X miles of the market. And the photo could be whatever photo you have that shows this variety. So it could be a photo of Joe and his eggplants, or a collage of, you know, the variety across the vendors, or, you know, and maybe including prices so that you're alleviating that concern that people might be stopping food sourcers from coming to the market. So that's one example, and the idea here is to take your values that you dreamed up for your target segment, and for each one come up with a post that is targeted at your primary visitor segment to attract them to the market. It's good to, of course, you don't want to, for communication, you don't want to communicate values that you're not serving well. Those are more like figuring out operations tweaks around those. But any value where you're serving it super well, and you know your community doesn't really know that about you, that's a super good one to communicate this way. So before maybe Stephanie can walk through some additional ideas, but before we do that, does anyone have questions on this piece? Or does one of you want to?
Maybe we can do it as a group.
Yeah, someone could volunteer a purpose and value, and then we can just do it as a group. And I will go into edit mode here.
I suggest that we stick with food sourcer, just because why not? And the value is that it's direct from the farmer, since that's the biggest draw I think that we all share as a farmer's market.
Sure. So to start, while Heidi gets to the editing page, what would be some relevant data points that you could collect that exemplify buying direct?
Maybe like percentage of your vendors that are producers only, as opposed to like middlemen.
Mm-hmm. Great.
Distance to that the farmers travel to the farmers market, not including the rest of your vendors, maybe.
Awesome.
Mm-hmm. Is there one about the actual visitors that could be done? Like, you know, how many visitors buy direct, source their food direct per week from the market, something like that?
Definitely. I think another way to think of the same value buying direct is supporting farmers, right? Because the buying direct is the customer side and supporting farmers is the farmer side. So maybe there's some information you could collect about the impact selling at the market has for your vendors specifically.
So the most recent quote I heard from American Farmland Trust is that for $10 spent at a farmer's market, 8 to 9 goes to the farmer, and $1.58 compared at if they sold at a grocery store.
That's a great one. Okay, I think that's plenty. So then let's move on to some unique details. So this will, of course, be different depending on your market, but let's throw some out there as examples.
One could be how a particular producer or vendor was able to grow their small business as a result of being a vendor at the market.
Love it. This might be going into social territory, but maybe a story about a friendship between a customer and a vendor.
Okay, doing a time check. I think we have about 10 minutes left, 9 minutes. So I think why don't we go ahead and do the, quickly list your values that you're going to do this for along the left, and see how quickly you can fill out ideas for those values. And if you have a question, please just ask it while you're doing it, and then we can come back and share a few examples.
It's just a big task.
Yeah, from my perspective, it would be interesting, for us as a group to continue working on this, because I feel like so many of our messages will be the same. We could just swap out the different, data points and anecdotes, because like, I'm sure I'm not alone. Like, we have no budget for marketing, and we have, that's part of my job too. So, I think that the most helpful thing would be for us to share with each other, and have the FMC and the farm board share with us, like, how can we do this? Here are some examples.
Should we just schedule a follow-on session?
I'm down for that.
That's fine by me.
Yeah, we can also make it so that the Excel document we shared is editable. So if you guys wanted to start compiling your examples and your data points into one shared document, that could be a way that we could all work together and have a little bit more time to collaborate. Susie's hand is risen. You can go ahead and ask your question, Susie.
Hi, folks. This is Susie from North Carolina, Old Beaufort Farmers Market. I was just informed of this session about 15 minutes ago, so I'm really late to the party. Would like to participate, but can I see this video from the top of the call?
Yes, so we're recording the video, and I will be sure to send it out to everyone who is on the registration, and it will also be available if you're a member of FMC in the membership portal.
Okay. I look forward to seeing this and being able to participate, but I just don't know what you're doing right now, so.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thanks for joining.
Thinking back to the beginning of the call, the communications, map, or the organization chart that was laid out was very well done. And it's almost like taking those examples and working through them, you know, in a way, if we could prioritize as a group, like which ones are most important to us, and then, you know, have those as the topic where we sort of work together and focus on those specific values and sources. I mean, that's how I think this could be super effective.
Okay. Yeah, I'm more than happy to do that. So how do we schedule? I can put that together and organize it. And then I guess, Stephanie, how do you want to best schedule? You know, everyone probably has scheduling constraints.
Well,
Do you
we're
all-
hoping to do this again in the future, so maybe there's a way that we can do it as a part 2, as opposed to starting from the beginning. But I'm planning on sending out a feedback form at the end of this to hear your guys' thoughts. So that could be a good spot to think about scheduling a follow-up as well. I think we're at pretty much out of time, the time we allotted. If people want to stay on and chat a little bit more with Heidi, we can. But otherwise, I will just send out the feedback survey, and we can see how we can continue this.
Sounds good. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks everyone for coming.
My email address is in the Excel, the spreadsheet that Stephanie sent out. So you can contact me there if you have questions or would like to have a conversation. I'm more than happy to give you free help on this. So yep. Okay, thank you.